Hello folks and welcome back. So now that we have our spell book that we can put on screen, we need to actually put those buttons in there so we can start selecting spells. Now the first thing that we're going to need to do in order to accomplish that is inside the player blueprint we need to set up two variables. So the first one is going to be spells selected, just to go ahead and get that one out of the way, and that is going to be a spell info structure. Then we are going to duplicate that one, and this is going to be spells known, and much like our inventory, it's going to be an array. So with that one selected, over in the details panel, we'll click that drop down and hit array. Compile that, and now let's go inside our spellbook. So we have all this set up and we have our uniform grid and all that, so we need to go into the graph, and I'm going to get rid of the pre-construct and the tick, and on the event construct I'm going to cast to the player. That way we'll be able to get those variables that we just set up. I'm going to get the player character as the object, and I'm just going to promote this to a variable. Player ref. Now we need to, kind of like we set up the inventory widget, we'll need to build the actual inventory grid. So I'm going to set 3 integer variables. First one will be row, make that an integer. Another one, that's our column, and then another one, that's our column length. Compile that, and I am going to set the column length to 5, just so that it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then start on the next row. So I'm going to compile that now real quick, and I'm going to create a custom event called build book. I'll call that right at the end where we create our player reference. And down here is where the magic happens. Alright, so I am going to first and foremost, right off the bat, we want to set the row and the column. We want to set these back to 0 so that every time we create this, it instantiates. Is that a word? It resets itself, basically. Is that a word? I'm not sure, but that's besides the point. We want it to start over every time, so it'll pop up, start from the beginning, and build accordingly. So now what we want to do is we want to grab out our player reference. From the player reference, we want to get that spells known array, because we are going to do a for loop. So we're going to right click, do a for loop right there. So to get the first index will be 0, but to get that last index, because we want this to fill up based on how many spells we actually know, we want to get the length of the array, which you remember arrays start at 0, but the length is measured 1, 2, 3. So what we're going to do is we are going to just drag that out, and we're going to subtract 1 from it right there. I'm going to drag that one down a little bit. So for the loop body, what we want to do is we want to create a widget. The widget is going to be our spellbook icon. Now to figure out what spell will be in it from our spells known, we will get a copy at the index that we're currently building. And once we create our spellbook icon widget thingy, we want to set, not item info, spell info. So we'll grab the spell info from that index of our array and plug it in right there. Now I'm going to drag out my spell grid, and I want to add a child to the uniform grid. So the child that I want to add is this icon that we just created at this row position and this column position. So I finally figured out which one is which. Row is up and down, column is left and right. So you want to increase the column after you do this, and then the row will take it down a notch. Like Elsa. Oh wait, he knocks it up a notch. Anyway, so I'm going to grab out my column integer, and I'm going to drag off and hit INC to increment it, so that every time it fires through, it'll increase that by 1. So from this result node, which measures the new result of that, we want to find out if it's greater than or equal to our column length. And if it is, we'll set up a branch. Then we want to set our column back to 0, grab out our row, and increment that one. So when we build the book, we're resetting it back to 0. We're grabbing out our spells. We're seeing how many we have by measuring the length and subtracting 1, which gets the actual number in the array. We're feeding that into our loop body and creating a spell icon for each spell we know. We're getting the copy of that spell at that index and setting the spell info so that the image and the text and everything fits accordingly. And then we're adding that child to our uniform grid and then increasing like that. So next thing we want to do is we want to go into our spell book icon. Now, since it's a button, we want to add an onClicked event. Now, for the onClicked, we just want to cast to the player. Just like last time, we'll get the player character. And we don't need to set it as a reference, we just need to go ahead and set spell selected to whatever our spell info is. Now we don't need to do any checks because we'll only be able to click this button if it's created in our spell book, which means we know the spell already, so no worries there. So I'm going to compile and save everything real quick because we still don't have any way of actually teaching our player the spells. So I'm going to set up just a quick function so you can add to it. So I'm going to use my F key, and I am going to get my data table, the data table being our spell book. I'm going to drag off of this row name and promote that to a variable called learn. So now when we're learning the spell, we want to grab our spells known array and add a unique instance to it. So we'll check this row and then add that to our spells known array. So I'm going to set that up there. And then we can drag out our spells known and set it. Drag it out and get it. And then we want to do a switch on name. Now these names will be just like our actually, you know what would be easier than that? Instead of doing that one as a text, let's disconnect it real quick and delete all the instances. And I'm going to set it as a spell name enumerator. Compile that real quick so we can access it. No, it's got no row names. So I'm going to drag that out, get an enum to string, and then plug that into there. So this will make it a lot easier. So now we can do a switch with on enumerator. Oh, maybe we gotta drag that out. Alright, I'm gonna grab that and then switch right there. So there's all our spell names. So now we don't have to type them in manually. We can just drag out our spell, set it, and then copy and paste that as many times as we need. I'm just gonna do 5 for now, just so you can see. So we'll just set all that up like so. From fireball, I want to set that to shock. From shock, I want to set that to ice. From ice to heal. Heal to enrage, and enrage to shield. I don't know why I was following these. It would just be go right down the line. So I'll compile that real quick. That's much easier than the other way I did this. Let me double check something real quick though. Oh, yeah. Alright, one more thing we want to do is after we do that, we want to find out if our spell book is currently active. So I'm going to drag out my spell book reference and find out if it is currently valid. I'm going to plug all of these directly into it. And if it is, then I want to go ahead and, I need to get my spell grid and clear all the children from it. Then we can grab out our build book function and hook that up like so. So we're getting the data table on the key press. We're using our enumerator to get the string that we're at. We're adding that particular spell to our array. I went completely blank for a second. Then we're switching our learn spell based on which one we were at, so that next time we fire it off, it gets the next one. And then we're rebuilding our book. So now if I jump in, and I'll full screen real quick so it's easier to see. You can see there's my fireball. That text is small. There's my shock, and I'm learning ice, and I'm learning heal, and I'm learning my first trap. And when I put it away, it comes back. So now we can actually get stuff into our spellbook. So now we need to get a way to tell the player which they have equipped. So I'm going to go to my HUD elements section and go to my player HUD widget. Now I'm just going to set a little image over here in the bottom left that just says what one is currently selected. So I'm just going to drag out my image. I'm going to anchor it to my bottom left. So I've anchored it to the bottom left. I've set its position on the X and Y to 0 and set the Y alignment to 1 so that it sits above. Now I'm going to set it to 75 by 75 and then just kind of adjust, that's the wrong direction. Adjust its position on the X and the Y to something that looks good. So I'm going to do 100 and negative 100 looks good for now. Compile that real quick. And then we want to set the brush. I'm going to bind that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my player reference. Player reference. There we go. And I'm going to find my spell selected. And I'm just going to highlight my spell image. So it'll plug right in there. But one thing we want is if we don't have a spell selected currently, we don't want it to show up. So I'm going to create a binding on the visibility. I'm going to drag this back, add a branch, grab out my player reference, get my spell selected, and I'm going to break it open because I need to see if this class is currently valid. So I'm going to drag off the spell class and ask, is it valid? If so, show up. If no, get to stepping. I'm going to compile, save everything real quick. And now when we go in, my spell book is empty when I first start, but as I start filling it, then I can click, and then there's my spell. Now we can't actually cast any spells yet, but we can fill our book, and we can into the next one. Okay. What am I trying to say? We can select one. There's the word. That's a word. Anyway, so in the next one, we'll start actually setting up our casting ability. Now, this function to add the spells to the book is just temporary. We are going to set it up to where you'll have to go up to an NPC and actually buy them later on. But for now, this will work so that you can test the spells as we establish them. So in the next one, like I said, we will start casting them. And I will see you there. And just like last time, don't forget, save. Save often, save regular. I've already saved, but I'm going to click it again. Click, click. All right. See you later. Bye.